This is our best bedroom here. We have people who just literally sit here in the day and just look at the view. But from that tree there, all the way across the top of those trees, well above the skyline, is where the turbines will be.
Hotel owner Muriel Goodman first learned 6 years ago that developers were planning to build a wind farm in the shallow Devon Valley below her hotel.
They go up, there's no way we'll stay.
That is a hell of a sign, Martin.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Farmer Martin Tucker wants the wind farm. He'll get 5 turbines on his land.
Morning, Mr. Tucker. Morning, Rose. Hi.
He's keen to help the environment, and he'll get a chance to retire on the proceeds.
So if we get it, it's a result.
But there's been fierce opposition.
Like you're a bed. Can you believe it?
A few turbines dotted around, it's not going to affect it that much.
So who'd like one of these in their garden?
The wind farm is the dream of project manager Rachel Ruffle.
I want everyone to love wind farms and then not to be protesters.
Come on, what's it? Yeah.
But Rachel's plans fell apart as the local council voted on the proposal.
That is carried. The application is refused.
But it's not over yet.
If we decide we're going to go to appeal, then I'll revisit it.
It's a story about the biggest dilemma facing the modern world.
We've got serious global warming issue going on at the moment, and if we don't do something about it, we are going to leave a dreadful legacy for the next generation.
It's about the sacrifices we're asked to make.
There's 3,000 years of continuous human settlement in that valley, and after which, it's as beautiful as it is today.
And it's about how the battle for our future played out in one Devon Valley.
Is it the same as usual? Oh dear.
Muriel Goodman bought her hotel for its outstanding position and views.
They won't even admit that it will affect our business because the companies say, well, this, it's a tourist attraction.
If the developers do appeal and win, she's worried her business will go under.
The view is going to be completely ruined for absolutely nothing. Here we go. The plate's very hot.
Well, that landscape, it'd be like a blot, wouldn't it? Terrible.
There is a possibility they might not appeal. We've heard nothing from them. They still, as far as we're aware, have made no decision at all.
The first thing we did when we came here was to plough all the ground up.
Because we were going to be self-sufficient, weren't we?
Mike and Bash Hume's cottage on the other side of the valley will be just over 1 kilometre from the nearest turbine. They moved to Devon 30 years ago to live a low-impact lifestyle. Their retirement plan before the wind farm was suggested was to sell the cottage, pay off the mortgage and move into the adjacent barn, the barn that now overlooks the wind farm site.
The view is more important to Bash than it is to me. My main concern is the noise.
Then closes a press release announcing our decision to appeal West Devon Borough Council's refusal of planning permission for the Den Brook Windfarm proposal. Okay, gone.
From her office nearby, the developer's project manager Rachel Ruffle is at last breaking the news that her company, RES, Renewable Energy Systems, is challenging the council's decision.
Excellent, good. I sent that email out this morning, got some messages back saying, well done, glad you're appealing.
If it goes through, I'm moving. I have no choice. Business is gone. To be forced out of my home, my business, the lot. It's just awful.
One from Mike Hume, who lives near the project. He's very worried that it's going to cause him a noise nuisance. As much as you can explain, until it's actually there and happening, he's not going to believe it.
I really do wonder if they've actually experienced a wind farm for more than a close-up visit.
Rachel also sends out the press release to the Den Brook Valley Action Group, who vigorously oppose the wind farm.
The only thing this is going to do is generate profit for a large company at very, very little benefit to anybody who's actually paying for all this lot.
Everything's been quiet in the area at the moment, but obviously when they've realise the people now has gone in, I'm sure things will kick off again.
Now, there will be a public inquiry.
Go on, shoo, shoo, shoo. Come here, you wicked girls.
The date for the public inquiry has not been set yet, but the council have written to see who'll wish to be what's called a Rule 6 party and be represented by a barrister. For individuals like Muriel and Mike, it's a difficult issue.
Res, big company, got plenty of money. You sort of think, well, what hope have I got?
They are one of the biggest developers in the country. They are going to have the best barrister. They're not going to have someone who's just coming off the street. They're going to have someone who really knows his stuff. It is a bit like a court. Well, it's going to be obviously quite nerve-wracking.
Big money against no money, you know, it's that sort of thing. You haven't got hope.
Developing the Den Brook Windfarm has certainly been expensive for Res, but the government promotes the growth of renewable energy by making it a lucrative business. And each county has ambitious government targets to meet. Devon has had to plan for 151 megawatts of renewable energy by 2010.
They don't look like they're generating to me.
So far, they've only reached 20% of their target. 3 megawatts of it are from this small wind farm run by another company, 30 miles from Den Brook. When he first came here more than a year ago, Mike was very worried by what he heard.
He says they can't hear that is got to be hard of hearing. We trade it.
Mike had started with a good relationship with Rachel.
No, it's just I use a barn.
And he gave Res permission to record background noise levels at his home, as long as they let him have the data. But when the time came for him to hand in his submissions to the council, they hadn't let him have the data.
I was waiting for some information from Res, and I'd get the feeling they've just basically fobbed me off. There's another 3 being proposed on the other side of the village.
He'd like to tackle Res about his noise concerns at the inquiry, but he's nervous about performing in public.
If I try and put myself up as an expert witness, their high-powered barristers and experts will just tear me to shreds. I'll sort of undermine my own credibility, and that's what their intention will be to do.
Right over the far side.
Rachel's bringing in contractors to test excavate the top layers of soil at the wind farm site. The area's rich in archaeological history, and she has to show the turbine bases won't disturb any remains. Each turbine will stand on 270 cubic metres of concrete.
Nice bit of wind today.
Yeah. Cool today, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of opposition.
It's not like masses of people, but it's a group of people who are quite vociferous and quite rich.
Yeah.
We're building them far enough that they're not going to create a noise nuisance.
Sure.
Obviously, you're going to be able to see them.
You do them all over the country?
Yeah.
Rachel's excavation work finds no evidence of remains on site.
Fine, Maury.
And matters arising?
Most are on the agenda.
The action group are meeting to prepare for the inquiry.
We agreed that we would appoint a junior barrister rather than a QC, and a particular barrister was proposed.
They're fundraising, but some are acting as guarantors to legal costs. So if they lose, they could be individually liable for thousands of pounds.
Pass on to the next item, which is registration of DBVAG as a charity.
They're wondering if becoming a charity could protect them.
And I don't mind if it then takes another year, but I would get my money back. Remember, if we defeat Res, the next power company will be right on their heels, making the same sort of application. I don't think this is the end of the day.
Well,
so I think we may find that our charitable status.
The inquiry date's been set for just 6 weeks' time.
I know I would be apprehensive in that situation.
I'm sure you would be
and I'm sure most
apprehensive.
people are.
Yeah,
Mike's still trying to decide whether to open himself up to cross-examination.
The legal profession that does these planning inquiries would generally say an appearance is going to make more impact than simply a written document. Could you ask the parties?
His friend Adam has a lot of experience of planning procedures.
I mean, you've written a letter which sets out things that you think the inspector should explore?
I've basically written a letter pointing to what I see as being flaws in the assessment that's been done.
Mike's been doing his own research. One type of turbine noise, something like this blade swish, is called amplitude modulation, or AM, and it isn't controlled by the standard industry regulations. It isn't mentioned in RES's noise assessment either. Mike's concerned that while it may be windy on the wind farm site, he's often noticed still air conditions around his property, so he's worried AM noise could easily travel that far. So Mike asks the inspector to make certain that suitable planning conditions would be put in place to protect the living conditions at neighbouring properties.
I've made suggestions as to what I think I would like to see done if the development is going to be approved.
So the other side are going to say, these are not flaws.
I would think so, yeah. Yeah, almost certainly they're going to say that.
So the cross-examination is going to, among other things, include, Mr. Hume, this is not a flaw, is it? Because our expert, who, unlike you, has actually used a noise meter.
Yeah, and is qualified and has got 50 years experience, etc.
Well, I think that's the point where you just say, Mr. Inspector, I'm not an expert. I've got these doubts. They still seem to me doubts. I can't answer this question, but I would like to make sure that I'm not got a good point.
All of these, look, none of this is significant. Look, significance level, not significant.
Action Group member John Welsby and his wife Jill have their set of RES's environmental statement documents, the ES, for just 24 hours. A set costs £50, so they're circulating it around committee members.
What they've actually said in the documentation is that they've enumerated the properties that are within a 3-kilometre radius of the site.
I see.
And of course the windmills are not in the centre of the site, no, they're spread out all over. And therefore, as a consequence of that, all these things get left out. So if you take the 3 kilometres from where the windmills are, surprise, surprise, it encompasses all Bow, it encompasses all North Taunton, and it encompasses Sprayton, which on their diagram here are all shown as being outside that 3 kilometre area, is carefully designed to put the best possible slant on what they're proposing. It's a good job we didn't have to rely on these people to put somebody on the moon, is all I can say.
A month before the full inquiry, the inspector calls a pre-meeting.
My name is David Lavender, and I'm the inspector that's been appointed to determine the appeal. But I do need to know who else is present today and the nature of their interest.
RES's case will be advocated by Marcus Trinick, a veteran of some 350 public inquiries. He's a wind farm specialist and a board member of industry body, the British Wind Energy Association.
But it seems to me that the principal issues in this appeal would be the need for sustainable energy generation. Secondly,
Inspector Lavender reminds everyone that he has to conduct the inquiry within the boundaries of government guidance.
I guess that you don't mean that we're going to debate the merits of government policy of this sort of thing.
Sorry. Presumably that means that the interpretation of what existing policy does say is a relevant matter.
It is relevant what it says at the moment, yes.
The interpretation of what it says.
The interpretation of what it says is a de facto matter, yes.
Thank you.
The question of government policy and its interpretation is not going to go away. All sides now have just over a month to finalise their key witnesses and circulate their arguments, their proofs of evidence. Before the meeting, Mike had been apprehensive.
I spoke to the inspector yesterday briefly, and he knew who I was, although he didn't really know what I'd written in my letter, but at least he knew who I was, so I'm certainly more inclined now to speak at the inquiry. I mean, I'd feel a little bit more confident about it, and so it's given me a boost in confidence to be able to get up there and tell them what for at the inquiry. But we'll see, we'll see.
10 days later, Rachel has a local PR problem to deal with.
Hello, Rachel Ruffle.
A critical article has appeared in the local paper by journalist Zoey Kenyon.
Yeah, Chris is sort of almost thinking about a letter, ask for a right of reply, or just a letter of complaint, really. So this is the article. Well, you know, it's really shockingly extreme. It's saying that we're not keen to tell them how dangerous the turbines are to birds, bats, or worse, to children. And that's just ridiculous.
On the Den Brook site, farmer Martin Tucker has seen it too.
There'll be many thousands of tons of concrete poured into rich and fertile Devon soil. Well, it's not on the rich and fertile Devon soil, it's on marginal land.
I mean, she's really just trying to make us out to be some kind of evil devil company. It's just ridiculous.
It's a view unrivaled by anything I've seen. Well, you want to get a life and travel, Mrs. I'd like to know where she lived, I really would. I would go and knock on her door and give her an open invitation.
Myrtle here! Myrtle! Biggest relief, I really can't imagine it.
When Zoey Kenyon moved with her family from London 2 years ago, she knew the turbines were a possibility.
This one likes being outside too.
But that was before they became 120 metres high.
As far as I'm concerned, they'll become the focus of the landscape. It won't be, you know, Dartmoor and Bow and Sprayton and fields and hills and trees and birds. It'll be turbines, just be enormous blades. Do you know, all I've had is people saying, what a great article. Few people have written in saying, brilliant, give me a ring, I'll fill you in on more stuff.
She's not happy to hear about Martin Tucker's invitation to visit his farm.
Oh, he wants me to go down?
He loves you too.
I'm a bit scared of him. He's not everybody's favourite person at the moment. I'm a bit scared about waiting for them to come knocking on my door one night.
They're running away from us, so they...
Well, just stand your ground if they come at us.
Oh, yeah.
Get the camera ready.
You can see me doing that. I suppose it would be good to have a stick or two, wouldn't it?
It's just days before the inquiry.
Right.
Res have given Mike a copy of their noise expert's evidence. In its highly detailed 42 pages, Dr. Andrew Bulmore also responds specifically to Mike's concerns. He reviews in detail his previous findings and the noise modelling that Res have undertaken, and concludes that close properties are not likely to suffer from enhanced AM.
That's really nice, isn't it, that little bridge?
He also appears to classify the terrain as undulating with moderate tree cover.
Our house is somewhere beyond those trees. You certainly can't call that undulating.
It's not undulating.
There's no way that's undulating.
It's not even insignificantly undulating.
I would say this is definitely flat.
Yeah.
Our field is more or less flat. The only... And that is just a slight slope up to where the turbine will be. Oh, look out, the bullets are coming.
Oh, right, they're curious, aren't they?
They've obviously sussed us.
Will we make it to the gate before they do?
Mike has put these new concerns in a final letter submitted to the Planning Inspectorate. Rachel is reading her copy of it.
Maybe we haven't explained properly what roughness classification means. It's not really applying to the nature of the undulating land, whether it's flat or undulating. It's applying to the ground cover. You know, whether it's trees or a smooth surface.
Do you model right down towards his house then as well, you mean? Or you just model around the side?
No, the whole area's included in a noise model. Maybe that's not made clear enough in our evidence, so...
You see? I mean, they could make mincemeat out of me if they wanted.
Now it's starting to become undulating.
Right,
isn't it? You
exactly.
Can see
you can
there's a big
see.
drop beyond that hedgerow.
Sure. But the nearest turbine, I think, is just going to be the other side of this hedge here.
Mike's just not convinced by Res's evidence. In his final letter, he says that as Res have withheld access to both their recorded noise and wind data, he's unable to independently verify the true situation.
Originally, I was told they wouldn't let us have the data because it was commercially confidential. But recently, I've been told that the reason they won't release it is because the opposition, or the objectors, will distort the figures, and so they're not going to release it for that reason alone. Now, who do you believe? What do you believe? I'm not going to be able to live with a constant whoosh, 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 whump, whump, whump in the background for the rest of my life.
I found out where Zoey Kenyon lived, visited her yesterday afternoon. We had a bit of discussion on the doorstep, which I was putting my point of view, and most of the things she wouldn't agree with.
I was holding a screaming baby, and the door was, that far open to stop these guys running out. I was going, stay back, vicious dogs. And so I was sort of peering around the thing, and I just felt myself start to cry. So I came in here and said, I'll take your number.
As she was holding her baby, I said, to her, how does it affect children? And she said it was only what I read. Well, I said, what have you read? And she couldn't quantify that at all.
He was just angry with me, obviously. And then his main argument was, I've been here for generations, what right have you got to say that after you've only been here for a couple of years? So at one point I think I burst into tears, because you can't really say anything to that. What can you say?
I was angry at one stage, I admit. She was determined to have her way and wouldn't sort of listen to facts.
Maybe if someone approached me and asked if they could put up a wind farm in my garden for thousands of pounds, I might go, yeah, okay, I saw the neighbours. Just stick it up, quickly as you can.
If you look at the perimeter there...
It's the eve of the inquiry.
Every time I think about it, I go wobbly in the knees.
I feel a sense of concern that I might not be able to do what I would like to do, and if my adrenaline or whatever takes over at the time, there's not a lot I can do about it. Because I used to have quite a few up at that top end, and they're not there now. There's nothing there.
I guess this is D-Day.
Very much so. I think this is going to go on for about 7 or 8 days.
Oh, I didn't realise I was on camera.
What's it about?
Yeah.
It's about a wind farm at North Taunton.
Are we going to get it?
We don't know. There's an inquiry.
Oh, we do.
Do you? OK, then, right.
Yes, it is right. We should have it.
The inquiry is scheduled for 7 days. The Rule 6 parties will call witnesses and are represented by lawyers who will cross-examine the other side's experts. Barrister Saira Kabir Sheikh is a planning specialist and will represent the coalition of opposers, the Den Brook Valley Action Group, the Campaign to Protect Rural England and the Dartmoor Preservation Association. West Devon Borough Council are represented by barrister Philip Drinkwater.
So I'll now begin by formally opening the inquiry. And this is an appeal by Renewable Energy Systems UK Limited against the decision of the West Devon Borough Council. My purpose in being here as a planning inspector is to apply government policy to this case.
The government states its policy is to cut carbon dioxide emissions while maintaining reliable and competitive energy supplies. Two objectives that the coalition are hoping to argue a wind farm just can't deliver. As the inquiry starts, Res aren't yet certain whether they'll choose to call their noise expert.
I don't know yet, call the third witness, Dr. Andrew Bulmore, whose group you already have. Thank you.
In their opening statement, they seek to remind the inquiry of the severe need for the Den Brook Windfarm.
The whole international and more local response to climate change is predicated on the accumulation of very many individual steps, each of which is essential to the effectiveness of the whole.
Next on my list, Ms. Kabir.
The group questioned the accuracy of the figures claimed for the level of energy generation and the development's impact on tourism and the socio-economic...
The coalition of objectors intend to question just how much actual energy will be produced and immediately draw attention to Res's reluctance to provide data.
The refusal to disclose this evidence is surprising, as the only apparent benefit of the proposal is the physical amount of electricity generated.
This could be a shake.
But for the coalition, there's a problem.
Government targets are, of course, expressed in terms of installed capacity.
This means RES only have to establish how much energy could come from the turbines if the wind blew all the time. The installed capacity.
The reasons for refusal are that the proposal would have a severely adverse visual impact on the local landscape, be detrimental to the amenity of residents.
For the rest of the first day, the council gives its evidence.
So with that then, I'll finish for this evening. We'll resume tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
But as the inquiry breaks up, Mike Hume has a surprise. RES's advocate, Marcus Trinick, has approached Mike and given him the phone number for RES's noise expert, Dr. Andrew Bullmore.
Got any idea why Andrew Bullmore wants to speak to me?
He's supposed to be sending you a response to your letters that you wrote to the inspector. You know, I think there's certain misunderstandings that you've got about.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah, so he was just going to talk to you about them because we knew you'd probably have further questions.
Right.
Yeah, we've got his mobile number.
I'll phone him on his mobile.
Charlie is the best thing to do.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
When Mike goes home that night, he doesn't phone Dr. Bullmore.
So good morning everybody, it's 10 o'clock and this inquiry is now resumed. It's an inquiry into a planning appeal by Renewable Energy Systems.
On the second day, an anxious Rachel once again has to ask Mike if he's made contact yet.
I just didn't phone him last night because I didn't feel I'd understood what he'd said fully.
Yeah.
I needed to, I'm not an expert on this stuff, which you well know. This is I'm in a weird position now, I really am. I came home and there's an email from Andrew Bullmore and a message on the phone.
With the email was Andrew Bullmore's 6-page rebuttal argument. Part of it explains how, in his view, Mike has confused much of the science.
This is definitely flat.
And that if Mike had been an independent, experienced acoustic professional, RES would have made the data available to him, as indeed they had to himself.
You can't call that undulating. I mean, he's sort of reasonably polite, but he's telling me I'm confused. The fact that he's rebutted my letter has now sort of enlightened me as to where I've effectively asked the wrong question. But I now think I know what the right question is. I briefly spoke to the coalition, and they trying to persuade me that if he comes to the inquiry, his evidence carries more weight because he will be questioned than if he doesn't come to the inquiry. And they see that as being an advantage to them. But then, thinking it through, it seemed to me, well, if that works that way, it equally well works for RES. So if RES bring Bullmore in for questioning, it adds a little bit of extra weight to his evidence. So why don't RES want to bring him in? The way I see it is, they're trying to suss out if I have got anything else of any possible strength to present to the inquiry.
This inquiry is resumed.
It's the next day. The inspector's keen to see where RES and Mike are at.
I did actually try to phone Mr. Bullmore last night and he was out.
Yes.
So I feel perhaps if it's acceptable, I would like to maybe put a brief written response to Mr. Bullmore's rebuttal, hopefully before the end of the weekend.
Well, could I suggest you try and ring today? I mean, that's when you're going to get hold of him.
I agree, but I wish to be here during the day.
Yes.
You've got a choice.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. As soon as possible, please.
On the third day, the coalition move on to examine RES's claims for Den Brook's energy output.
Mr. Constable, can I introduce you, please? You are John Constable, is that correct?
John Constable, Director of Policy and Research at the Renewable Energy Foundation, is the bane of wind farm developers' lives. He argues that RES's claims for the capacity factor, the real energy yield from the wind farm, are overstated, and they cannot be verified because of RES's withholding site-specific wind data.
Have you seen the letter from the National Power Company which confirms the capacity factor of this site?
I have read that, yes. It does not provide any data. It asserts a capacity factor without providing data.
But of course it's academic. The inspector is not required to verify the capacity factor, how much electricity the Den Brook turbines will really generate, just the installed capacity.
It would be possible, I suppose, in theory at least, would it not, to be able to meet that capacity as an installed capacity with turbines which didn't actually generate any electricity at all.
That would be the reductio ad absurdum argument.
Yes.
Yes. It is conceivable. You could meet the target. And obviously the point is to generate energy.
Yes.
The Den Brook Valley Action Group are next to put their case.
I think the problem with a lot of politicians is I think they actually mean well.
Leading for them is John Welsby, CBE, a former chief executive of British Rail and at one time a member of the government's economic service. He knows the captains of industry.
Oh, look at the airplane.
Yes.
Now that's about the height that those turbines will be. I happened to ask a nameless person who's fairly big in all this lot, what did he think about these wind farms? His reaction was, well, we all know the future is nuclear. Right? But in the interim, there's some real good money to be made on these wind farms. And that's what's actually happening. Carry on.
John believes policies should deliver results and that the Den Brook proposal won't deliver the government's objectives of secure and competitive energy supplies.
Yes.
Unless they've got some Chinook helicopter.
And because of that, it's not worth impacting on the landscape.
To put it there, it's just sacrilege, I think.
DBVAG contend that the impact on landscape character is clearly adverse, and to a very major degree. After 3,000 years, I'm sorry, it gets me that badly, that there's 3,000 years of continuous human settlement in that valley, and after which, it's as beautiful as it is today. The current proposal involving, as it does, the construction of huge industrial structures will destroy that character entirely. I always get emotional about it. Landscape is very dear. They ain't creating any more of it. And what we've got is all we're ever going to have. Certain things get me, you know. Cruelty to animals, desecration of landscape, all of which are things that need not happen. And that did get me just momentarily. But our analysis shows that not only will the mean performance of the turbines be poor, what on earth are we sacrificing this beautiful environment for? You won't tell us. And if you spend the whole of your 151 megawatts in building power stations that are not going to deliver any electricity, you're in, as the Americans would say, pretty deep doo-doo.
The inquiry adjourns for the weekend. Mike Hume goes to write his submission, and he finally speaks, several times, to Resi's noise expert Dr. Bullmore.
You know, what irritates me a little bit about all this is that I've been batting on to Rachel about this for over a year, and suddenly, at the last minute, someone's actually talking to me about it, and I'm grateful to you for talking to me about it, but it's pushing me very hard. Whoa. He is totally satisfied that that noise assessment is good. In fact, he's more that way today than he was last night, because I was much more challenging to him today than I was last night. I've got a long night ahead of me.
Mike now knows the 3 questions he wants to ask Res. Would they give residents more protection through increased monitoring and stronger penalties if noise levels were breached? Could he have access to their wind data? And would they undertake further background noise recordings to properly reflect seasonal changes? Day 4. And Mike Hume hasn't completed his final submission yet, as he's waiting for Res's answers to his questions.
I was expecting to be contacted yesterday by Dr. Bullmore.
Yes.
He said he was going to speak with Res,
yes.
And he hasn't got back to me.
Yes. Please do continue making the efforts if you can, and Mr. Trinick, if you can ask Mr. Bullmore if you're in touch with him. Yes, thank you. So we've put down the marker if you can get the information.
Later in the morning, Rachel speaks with Mike in the lobby outside and gives him the answers to his questions. He claims Rachel replied no to all three. Inspector Lavender is also going to have to make a ruling on a matter that could potentially result in a costly adjournment of the inquiry.
What they've actually done is enumerated properties that are within 3 kilometres of the centre of the site. Right. And of course the windmills.
The Coalition's expert landscape witness, Fiona Fife, has criticised RES's approach in her proof of evidence. She claims 1,000 properties that could be affected have not been assessed. So over the weekend, Rebecca Rylett for RES has done some extra fieldwork and examined a number of the additional properties.
It is strictly a rebuttal. It's not a supplementary. It only addresses...
If her work is classified as supplementary evidence rather than evidence re-evaluation, there will need to be an adjournment, while a statutory process of consultation and publicity allows all those affected to respond.
What it looks like is that, having received Fiona Fife's evidence, recognised that there are errors which would lead to a greater impact on a larger number of properties, they've now gone behind the ES at this late stage and sought to downgrade, through some justification or the other, the findings of that ES. Was that's simply unfair and wrong. I object to this even going in, frankly.
Inspector Lavender delivers his verdict. He's taken into account that he's going to be hearing from many affected residents very shortly.
It's my conclusion that I will treat the submission as evidence, not further environmental information, evidence which it is useful to have placed before me. And as such, it would not be my intention to adjourn the inquiry while statutory consultation processes were invoked.
This means that some homeowners are presumably unaware they might be affected and probably aren't even at the inquiry to give their views. Nevertheless, Rebecca Rylett for RES is now free to start her detailed evidence.
The wind farm proposal is of an appropriate scale and number of turbines for this location and will offer the opportunity of an exciting sculptural and architectural landmark to this landscape where there is none existing, whilst providing a striking counterpoint.
But Mike and Bash have to go home.
If I don't have it by tomorrow lunchtime, I'm going to get my backside smacked, I expect. Yeah, I've got a long night ahead of me, I fear.
Beech Tree. I considered that this property was under-assessed and would have a view of the wind farm with limited screening. Elm Ridge. This property was missed out of the previous assessment, one exclamation being the minibuses parked in front of the property.
Hi, Mike didn't make it then.
Evening.
Hi.
No, he's busy.
Oh, he's
All right.
busy, yeah. Lovely to you to come over anyway, thank you.
Oh, you're
Just can
welcome.
update me on everything. She's obviously put the cat among the pigeons.
Yes.
In Res's camp, which is good.
Yes.
You couldn't really get much higher than Trinick, I don't think, Secretary to the BWEA.
Yes, but he set it all up, really, him and a few other people. Recommended to the government how to go about all this EXU recommendations and stuff. So, I mean, he's been doing it for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
He's part of the policy-making team, I would think.
But I think what they wanted to do is to actually pump Mike to see whether he's got anything.
Mike does everything to his limit. Am I worried about him? Oh, yes. He stresses himself out, and he's been known to pass out when he gets stressed. Yes.
Oh,
He
dear.
just will be glad at the end of the week.
Yeah.
He'll be
It's not finishing on Friday, though, is it? There's still Monday and Tuesday or not?
Is there? I don't
I don't
think
know.
so.
Well, there
I
was
think
going to be
it was
Monday and Tuesday.
How long did it take?
Well, I was up till about 3:30 this morning, and then we've just been doing it for about 3 hours. And it's pathetic, you know, because it's only 3 pages.
As Mike arrives back, the inquiry is turning again to the vexed issue of interpretation of government guidance. Appearing for RES is their planning expert, David Stewart. And the question is whether, as the deadline draws closer without meeting renewable energy targets, shouldn't less weight be given to environmental concerns?
I think the simplest answer is to say, if you have a look at the NABS Ridge decision,
Sorry, if you have a look at
If you have a look at the NAB's Ridge decision.
Is that a planning appeal decision?
It is in my proof. It is one of the core documents.
Right, that's not government guidance. Can we just stick at the moment?
No, hang on a minute. I'll answer the question the way I like. If you don't like the answer, you can come back
No,
afterwards.
Mr. Stewart, I must insist that...
I have to continue that.
Yes, Mr. Stewart, the question is quite specific. If you later want to go to that document, you may. But I'm asking the question, and the question is very specific. Where in government guidance does it have that requirement?
The requirement in government guidance is to deliver the targets. Paragraph 2, the Energy White Paper indicates the government will be looking to work with regional bodies to deliver the government's objectives.
Yes, all right.
Now, no planning authority, no interest group can say that doesn't matter.
All right.
The whole essence of this is to make it clear there has to be a step change in the delivery of schemes.
Well, Mr.
Now,
Stewart,
I can't read it any other way than that.
Tonight, local residents will have the opportunity to address the inquiry. The majority present are against the turbines.
There may be a case for wind farms. There may be a place for wind farms. That place is not Den Brook.
We knew that we had found a... Sorry.
There's some water on the table if you want it.
It's not that, it's just this means a lot to me.
Yes, I can understand it.
We knew that
Take
we
your
had
time.
found a place that our guests would be able to relax in. Indeed, I rarely see my visitors' face on arrival. They ring the doorbell and then turn around and face the beauty of the landscape.
Thank you. So, Mr. Emanuel, my understanding is that you're a supporter of the wind farm. Then when you're ready, thank you.
I practice as a chartered architect. I'm not qualified to comment on the technical aspects of the proposal, but I can speak about its visual impact. As a piece of engineering, I think many people would find them to be objects of beauty. They have an inspiring directness of purpose on a par with other great icons of civil or mechanical engineering. In this extensive landscape, in my opinion, there could not be a more appropriate place to site it. This is a small but significant, vital and urgent contribution to the national requirement for sustainable energy. Without it, those cherished views which we are talking about could terribly soon dry up or be covered with ice as a result of climate change. I would ask, if not here at Den Brook, where? If not now, when? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emanuel.
I will keep this part very brief, as there isn't enough paper in the world to say what I want to say.
Would you like to stop for a moment and I'll call someone else forward if you want to gather yourself?
The first 10 years living at Winslake were idyllic. We have a summer house in our garden, and we often partake of meals there. And yes, you have guessed it, it also faces the valley. This is an industrial site that doesn't belong in our valley.
Thank you.
Mike Hume's moment has come.
You produced a short proof, and can you begin by reading it then, please?
I object to the proposed development on the following grounds. The background noise measurements were carried out without due consideration and are unrepresentative for the area. Data from the noise measurements have not been made available for third parties to test the claims.
Rather than sway with emotion, Mike Hume just wants to get his detailed concerns on record.
This begs the question as to whether information has been purposefully withheld. But not being allowed access to the data, I have been unable to seek the opinion of an expert of my choice. Surely this is not an unreasonable request.
Inspector Lavender hasn't had access to the noise data either, and he doesn't ask Res for it.
I don't think, in all honesty, I could give anybody any cast iron guarantee that they will not be affected by noise to the extent that a condition is not necessary. A condition would be necessary. That
He urges Mike to attend the forthcoming condition session, but Mike still hasn't finished all he wants to say.
Along with many others, I have already suffered significant impacts from this scheme. If you, sir, are to rely on data only available to the appellant, it appears to me contrary to the principles of natural justice for a decision to be made on the basis of assertions made by one party that cannot be tested by the other.
Mr. Trinick, did you wish to ask any questions?
Maybe just a couple for clarification.
This is the moment Mike has been dreading.
If you see the catalogues on figure 9.5, that's the...
Marcus Trinick takes him through the noise data that has been published.
Do you mean the mean curve or the derived curve?
Rather than alleviate Mike's concerns, it seems to accentuate the gulf between them.
If you look at the bottom of the nighttime plot, you've got basically a straight line. It's certainly straight compared with on the daytime.
Well, we'll have to agree to differ. I'm not going to seek agreement on figure point 7.
Right.
Yes.
Sure.
I'm anxious to avoid getting into evidence.
Mike doesn't know it now, but everything he has just said will severely hinder Res's advancement with the Den Brook proposal.
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the inquiry? We've reached the time of 20 to 11. So thank you very much, everybody. We're now finished for the evening. Thank you.
After an emotionally charged evening, Marcus Trinick offers round sweets. Tomorrow is the final day of the inquiry.
So I'll begin with those.
The last session before the site meeting is to discuss the planning conditions that would be imposed were the wind farm to be built. It's what Mike Hume sees as his last chance to have a say on protecting his future peace and quiet.
The intention is that the ETSU guidance in terms of decibel levels is effective.
The regulations allow noise up to set levels above the disputed background noise measurements Res had taken 12 months previously at his property.
We measured higher levels here than we did at Broad Nimit.
What, of ambient?
Yep, background noise. So it's not the quietest place in the world.
Yes, Mr. Holland.
As you well know, sir, I believe the background noise measurements were not as good as they may have been.
Yes.
And as it seems to depend on those, I can't see how this is a satisfactory solution.
So you would suggest, presumably, there'd be some mechanism to revisit the background noise levels. Mr. Trinick, any comments on that?
Absolutely no persuasive evidence before this inquiry that the background noise measurements are anything other than professionally made, robust and reliable and representative of all relevant conditions that would be very strongly resisted by us.
Well, Mr. Holm, you've heard the robust response from the appellant. I don't think we're going to gain anything by debating it further. I have your position, I have Mr. Trinick's position, I'll need to make a judgment on it.
As appellants, Res have the final summing up at the inquiry.
A small price to pay for assisting in combating the worst effects of climate change. And if you feel that I am gilding the point, please look no further than the July 2006 government publication This Energy Challenge, where Annex D includes this text. New renewables projects may not always appear to convey any particular local benefit, but they provide crucial national benefits. These wider benefits are not always immediately visible to the specific locality in which the project is sited. However, benefits to the society and the wider economy as a whole are significant, and this must be reflected in the weight given to these considerations by decision makers in reaching their decisions. And I ask you to grant planning permission for this development. Thank you.
Only tomorrow's site visit remains before a decision.
To say anything. If I'm not, I won't.
Only if you want to point something out to me to look at, not to express any opinions about it.
The site visit begins on Martin Tucker's farm. The objectors are flying a balloon at blade tip height, but visibility is poor.
The balloon is at the right height. It's also flying at something of an angle, so one can't be precisely sure.
That property there is Redlands.
Yep.
Right on the hill.
So effectively, I can't see Nichols Nimit House or Hotel from here then.
Not from the
It's behind that group of trees, yeah.
They're due at Muriel's Hotel about 11.
It's my business, my livelihood, my children's home could all hang on the next, I don't know, half hour.
There are several sites to be visited before Muriel's.
If you want to join me, please do. Otherwise, I'll pop over there and back by myself. OK, thank you. I think I've seen what I need to from here. So the balloon position is in approximately here.
You see the traffic moving on the A road over there
Yes.
that goes past the site as well.
OK, thank you.
They were probably late, so they thought, we can leave her out. She's only a business that's going to go past.
So I can see the anemometer mast over there.
Yes, that's right.
So there'd be a spread of turbines across on that side. Yes. Can you remind me of the lady's name here?
Here they come.
Muriel hopes the driver won't park the minibus where it'll obscure the view.
Oh, go on, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Hi, Miss Goodman.
Welcome to the Goodman House.
Okay.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
You coming in, John?
I'd like
This is
to
Jane.
see a representative view from a
Yeah,
bedroom,
yeah.
and if you have a main sitting area where your guests sit,
Right.
I'd like to see that as well.
I'll take you upstairs.
Yes. I can see the balloon over there.
The first turbine will be... On the map, it's directly in front of us.
Yes. That tree is that tree on the horizon, but it would mean that a turbine is in view to the right of that tree. And then the rest of the turbine would spread around the horizon in that direction.
Yes.
I can just stand a little bit back from the window and take a general
Excuse me.
view.
Most of my guests pick that chair first.
Right, well, let me sit in the chair and see.
And they do look forward.
Thank you very much indeed for that, then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We'll be going up to across the...
Most of the turbines will lie off to the right, between the hotel and its view of the moor.
And that's the American bow. Of course, it's bow now.
Okay, I think I've seen and heard what I need to.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much
Very
for
kind of
coming.
you to let us
Thank you.
let's see. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, he didn't want to look at me directly, is all I can say.
Who?
The inspector.
I didn't know. I thought he was very...
As we said goodbye, he didn't want to look at me directly.
He looked at me.
Oh, he's very pleasant, yes, he did, but he didn't sort of, it was that sort of look and go away. It's guilt. It's guilt. And all Rebecca Rylett could do was kiss him. That's Bo over there, and that's the lake that you were talking about, taking his eyes completely off up this way. He's not stupid, he's not stupid, he's not stupid at all. No, he's very astute, I think, but you'd have to be in that job.
Something to hold on to. No. And try and open your viewpoint 9, so I'll take a bit of shelter.
So that's the cheese factory there.
Yes. Okay, I think I've seen as best we can. Thank you very much. Very helpful.
The site visit closes the inquiry. Inspector Lavender will be announcing his verdict in the new year.
I couldn't have believed it was so much windier up there than it was down in the valley today. But there's plenty of worse jobs to do. You do get to see places in the countryside.
It's decision day. Muriel's not at home, but her husband Paul is, waiting for word.
I don't really want to live here if those turbines are built, because the reasons we bought the house are for its position and its view and its proximity to Dartmoor.
Inspector Lavender's decision will first be communicated by email.
Right, shall we check?
Rachel Ruffle's ready and waiting too, in her office nearby. At Res HQ beside London's M25 motorway, no one's predicting the result. Many of their wind farm applications have been turned down at public inquiry.
Just got the decision notice here.
can't read it.
My God. I'm not sure what it means because I'm too sort of, I don't want to go off the deep end. Do you know what I mean? I'm not looking because I just want to explain it, because I keep having this sort of dream where I see it but I can't actually make it out what it's saying. You know, I don't know which bit to look at first. But shall I read it to you, what it says, and you can tell me what it means? Summary of decision, the appeal is allowed
and planning permission granted subject to the conditions set out below. So that's it.
Oh dear.
Oh, well, I did expect that.
Permission granted subject to conditions set out.
Yeah. I can't believe it. Oh, thank you, Marcus.
Yeah. Right, I suppose we better phone Muriel, haven't we?
Don't know who to phone first.
Hello. Hi. The appeal is allowed. And planning permission granted subject to conditions set out below.
Hiya. Yeah, hi.
Congratulations.
Well done.
I can't believe it, we've got it. Fantastic, isn't it?
Well done. Fantastic achievement.
He thinks only one turbine will be visible from room 1, and if one turbine, if you take 2 steps back, you won't, from the window, you won't see any.
Very, very well constructed conclusions from what, just from a very quick ski across.
Yeah.
Indeed, within Devon, he has little doubt that this location would, because of, rather than in spite of its inherent topographical characteristics, rank highly amongst the landscapes most able to accommodate development of this type, scale and extent proposed. Well, I disagree with him totally.
There you are, he's made his decision, he's ruined our lives and loads of other people's. I'd like to know where he lives and whether he's got turbines coming up near him.
Well,
Sorry?
he'd soon move. I said he'd soon move, I suspect, if he had that threat.
There's just not enough room to do a cartwheel. I need to go outside and run.
You could try.
Do you know what I mean? I do. I just need to...
Perhaps we should put the house on the market.
I mean, there's no chance, is there?
I'm disappointed, but I kind of expected the worst.
What's going to happen to us now? It's, you know, there's been this thing in the back of our minds all the way along. You know, this is the end of our pension, because our pension is in our property, and is our property going to be saleable?
But we have to go to the next stage now, I suppose, and work out some...
We've got to keep on the game as far as the noise is concerned, because I believe there is going to be a noise issue. The developers have not been fully open with their assessment, as far as I'm concerned. They've withheld information. Morally, we have a right to have that information, I believe. And for them to not let me have the information on the basis that I won't understand it, you know, it's insulting. I'd never imagine this is just surreal, the whole situation. What am I doing? Stood here in a suit outside the main court of the country. My rightful place is in a field down in Devon.
The judge said he couldn't believe our attitude and our approach to Mike.
So you can let me have the data? Because I really would like to see what is going on.